So welcome back. In today's episode, we're reviewing this Fujifilm 10-24mm f4 lens. Now, this is the old version. Fujifilm released a new version earlier on in the year. I used that for about 2 to 3 weeks on a unit I rented in. I've used this lens here for about 2 to 3 years. And I mainly use it for photography and some video too. So firstly, who is this lens for and how do I use it? Now, I picked up the 10-24 shortly before going to Japan, and I mainly used it for cityscapes, for landscapes, a bit of street photography too, and it's just a really fun and versatile lens. I mean, you can pretty much do anything with it. It's also really good for video. So when I went to Japan, I was using the X-T3, which doesn't have in-body stabilization. So having the stabilization on the 10-24 was a lifesaver. So it's always a lens I bring on me on trips because you're never quite sure what you're going to come across when you're traveling, and it's also a lens I almost always bring with me while I'm working as well. So what's the major differences between the old 10-24 and the new one? Now, on the face of it, they pretty much look the same. It's the same size, the same length, the filter size is the same, and they pretty much weigh the same as well. The new version is around 25 grams lighter, but they feel the same in the hand pretty much, and when you're holding it, you're not going to notice a massive difference. However, Fujifilm have made a couple of major changes to the inside of this lens, and firstly is the weather resistance. Now, for this feature alone, in my opinion, it's worth paying the extra for the new version, and that's because this lens is aimed at people who love landscape photography, cityscape photography, architecture, and for those types of photography, you're pretty much outdoors, especially if you're doing landscape. And the last thing you want to be doing when you're out there shooting is worrying about your gear and always checking your phone to see if the rain's coming or if the snow's coming, because you'd have to stop shooting. Whereas with the new 10-24, you don't have to worry about that. Whether it's raining, whether it's foggy, if it's snowing, if it's really hot, you don't have to really worry about the lens at all, and it just gives you that peace of mind. And as I said, for that reason alone, in my opinion, it is worth upgrading if you have got the old version of the 10-24 to the new one, or if you are thinking of buying this lens, to opt for the new one instead. Next up is the image stabilization performance. So as I said earlier on in this episode, I use this lens a lot for filming B-roll, filming the documentary style stuff, filming stuff for work while I was out in Japan. And the stabilization in the old version was so handy, especially as the body I was using didn't have image stabilization. So with the newer version of the 10-24, you're now getting 3.5 stops of stabilization. Previously it was 2.5. And when you pair it with, say, the X-T4, it's going to work with the stabilization in the body as well. So it's going to be a perfect pair. I mean, it's the kind of lens and camera body combo where you can just slap the 10-24 on the front of your X-T4 and never really have to think about changing your lens at all. Especially if you're doing video and you're doing some more landscape / cityscape type of photography around the city. So there's a couple more minor changes Fujifilm did make to this lens. First up, they took away the image stabilization switch. Now, in my experience, this image stabilization switch is really loose. There's been a number of times where I've knocked it by mistake and I've ended up filming stuff with the stabilization off. I'd much rather this option just be in the menu of your Fujifilm camera and not actually be on the lens. Next up, Fujifilm have also added a numbered aperture ring to the new version of the 10-24. For me, this is another improvement. The old version didn't have a numbered one and the aperture ring just spins endlessly, whereas on the new one, it brings it in line with Fujifilm's other zoom lenses which have the numbered aperture ring. Other than that, in terms of image quality and in terms of autofocus, the new version of the 10-24 is pretty much identical to the old version. So we're going to get into a bit more detail on that right now. So next up, let's talk about how this lens performs, and firstly, image quality. Now, as I said, the old version of the 10-24 and the new version of the 10-24 in terms of image quality are going to be the same. Now, as with all Fujifilm lenses, you're not really going to have a problem with image quality, and it's just the same with this 10-24. It's a really good lens, really sharp. Even at 10mm at f4, around the center bit, it's going to be really sharp. Yeah, sometimes in the corners when you're wide open at f4 and you're shooting at 10mm, they can be a bit soft, and that's fairly common with zoom lenses, especially with wide angle ones. Now, if you stop down to around f5.6, f8, that goes away. When you're shooting at 10mm, the lines are pretty straight. There isn't any crazy lens barreling or any kind of crazy distortion going on. Is it as good as the 8-16? No. The 8-16 has better image quality. it's better wide open, but it is a lot bigger and a lot more expensive as well. The 10-24 is a more versatile lens than the 8-16. You can do video with this, and it's much easier to attach filters to the front of this lens compared to the 8-16 as well. So overall, when it comes to image quality, you're not going to have many complaints. Are there wide angle lenses from Fujifilm which are better? Yes. But with the 10-24, you are getting a couple of advantages. You're getting the image stabilization, you're getting the compact lens, which is a lot lighter than the 8-16, and you're getting a really useful focal length as well, because you're going all the way up to 24mm. There's also the Fujifilm 16mm f1.4. That's also a superior lens, but obviously it's a prime. And the same goes for the 14 2.8, which I found to be the better wide angle lens. So yeah, when it comes to the image quality, the 10-24 is really good. Next up, let's talk autofocusing. Now, as with the image quality, the autofocusing on the old version of the 10-24 is near identical to the new version. They're using the same focuser motors, and from my experience, it is pretty much exactly the same. And that's a good thing, because the focusing on this is really good. Whether you're doing video, I didn't really experience any focus breathing. For photography, I find it really reliable. Even when I was doing street photography with this lens at 24mm, I already had no problems picking out subjects, moving subjects moving towards the frame, away from the frame. And it pretty much performed like the Fujifilm f2 range of lenses. So really fast autofocusing, no complaints in that department whatsoever. Finally, the handling, the look, the feel of this lens. Both the old 10-24 and the new one pretty much feel the same in the hand. In my opinion, they look great. And best of all, when you zoom with these lenses, the zoom in all takes place within the body of the lens and doesn't extend out of the barrel in the same way the 16-55 does. As for minor differences, the new version has the numbered aperture ring, which is an improvement. Also, the focus ring on the new version is a bit more narrow compared to the one on the old version. In my opinion, the one on the old version is easier to use, but it's not a big deal, and it's something you will get used to after using the lens a couple of times. In all, it feels good in the hand. I feel like it's a lens which matches perfectly with the X-T4 and the X-T3. And for a zoom lens which goes from 10-24mm, I'd say it's pretty light in the hand and just feels pretty good as well, especially when you compare it to the 8-16, which is a lot heavier and a lot bigger too. So yeah, this is a welcome upgrade from Fujifilm. I think for that weather resistance alone, this lens is worth upgrading. And if you are thinking about buying the 10-24, I highly recommend going for the new version over the old one. Also, there's a nice boost to the image stabilization, going from 2.5 to 3.5 stops. And when you pair it with the X-T4, it'd be a really good lens for shooting video on. So why haven't I updated yet? The main reason is because I haven't been traveling. And recently I've been more into street photography, and I've only really used this lens for work purposes, mostly indoors for interiors. So once we're out again traveling, I probably will upgrade to the newer 10-24. Maybe I'll wait till Fujifilm drops one of their promotions. That said, if you are specifically into landscape photography or architectural photography, it may be worth going for the 8-16 instead. The 8-16 is Fujifilm's best wide-angle lens, and at those wider focal lengths like at 8mm, 10mm, you are going to get better shots with the 8-16 than you are with the 10-24. But if you are looking for a more all-round lens, you're looking to do a bit of video, a bit of street photography, then this 10-24 will have you covered. If you are looking for primes instead, as I said earlier, the 16 1.4 or the 14 2.8 can be great options as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you have any questions about the 10-24, drop them in the comments below and I'll make sure to get back to you. As always, you guys can do me a massive favor by hitting that thumbs up button. It really does make a massive difference to the channel. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button as well. A huge thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.